huge because that's a very expensive job to get done. So here we go. I'm gonna get her started. All I gotta do is hit go. I'm just gonna do this live. I'm not gonna stop the camera or anything. Woo! Yes!
I'm gonna make something great. That's my way.
Hey, how's it going? Today I'm going to throw the engine and transmission into the front of the car. And I've got to do a couple things beforehand. I have to get the distributor on. I have to get the cross member. I have to get the headers on. I do all that stuff before it goes in. So I'm gonna be pulling it from the bottom. Here I'm just throwing on the headers. You can actually keep them together from the collector if you're careful. You just have to have the axles out and then it'll slide right up under there and then you can get it in. So when you remove it, every time you don't have to take off the actual collector gaskets. So those are always sealed up. This actual header set that I'm putting on, I did not make. Obviously I will be making them eventually, but for now, they work great for the front, and I'm leaving it at that. Here, I'm just doing some cleaning beforehand, putting it in, so I don't have to clean the intake actual part of the head when I've got it in the engine bay, so I'm just saving myself a little bit of a headache, you know? Alright, so I'm about to drop it, put it on the floor, drag it over underneath the car. The car's got to be pretty high in the air. I usually have it on the engine crane while I'm throwing it underneath the car, but I got it high enough with the jacks, so I did that, got underneath, threw it underneath, and now I can just pull her up, nice and smooth, make sure it's level. Now, since I've got power steering stuff in there, I've got to watch out for all these lines, and that is honestly a pain because usually it's all open. Okay, as you can see, I'm ready to pull the engine in, which is very exciting. I am stoked. So I'm just gonna go over a couple things when I'm pulling my engine in and out and what I do. I usually put a strap around the tranny, attach it to itself again, and then straight up to the engine crane. Due to the actual mounts that are being pulled on are on the left side of the mast. So if I pull from the right as well, it'll pull it up straight. So I'm just gonna pull it off the ground a little bit. And she's coming up straight, but as you can see, it's just slightly to the right. So I'm going to tighten this strap until it's straight, and then that'll make my life a million times easier when I'm pulling it in. One of the main reasons I come from the bottom mostly is because you don't scratch the engine bay. Like, the engine doesn't come much higher in the frame rails, so pretty much you're good to go after that and bolt up. When I'm feeding it from the bottom, I'm usually trying to get my cross member in first, which I'm doing right now underneath the vehicle. I get them in about 2-3 full turns and leave it. Don't tighten anything, and then go to the other mounts and just get them into the hole. After a few minutes here, got them all in 2 to 3 turns. Now I'm just underneath, impacting them all in, getting them torqued, all that good stuff. All the pressure's relieved. Engine sitting in the actual mounts. It's looking good. Been pretty smooth today, to be honest. Right now I'm relieving the pressure off the crane. Time to move her out of the way. It's time to get dirty. Bam! Look at that. Engine and tranny is in the front. Woo! Looking sick. Glad I put a cover on that. There's a lot of dirt on there, but nonetheless, that looks dope. Everything's looking good. Tranny is in, engine's in, bolted down, everything's tight, moving forward. Turbo goes on. Like I said before, it's not a big deal putting my turbo on because I made one V-band put the whole mess together. So once I originally removed this, I just took off this one V-band, the in and out for the turbo, feed and drain, and then boom, she comes off. Got to take off the electrical for the wideband, but other than that, that's it. Now she's going back on, it'll be easy. So as you can see, this is my feed. It is on the top of the turbo. If it's on the bottom, that's wrong because it's gravity fed. So it's on the top, that's good. And now I'm just feeding my actual oil feed into my block. And then I've got my drain, which is right here. And that goes to the oil pan down under here, right there. Just throwing the drain on real quick. I unfortunately forgot to tighten the actual feed. You'll see later, but yeah, not good. I tightened up my oil drain and I also put my shifter on. Those are the only two things that I have to do underneath the car. I've made everything very easy to work on. So I made everything so I can work on from the top, on jack stands. So then I have perfect working height. So I don't need a hoist, and it makes things easier and more fun and enjoyable. I'm gonna put on my clutch slave. So since it was sitting for a long time, the piston came out of the slave. So I'm gonna have to relieve some pressure and push it in. And if I'm careful, I'll just crack it, push it in, then tighten it. Hopefully won't get too much air in it, and I'll just do a quick bleed and it'll be all good again. I've got the nipple loose, so I'm just gonna loosen it while pushing on this, so it just pushes out fluid. Fluid's coming, a little bit more. Because when I pump the clutch later on, it's gonna push fluid in and not air, so hopefully this will work. I'm sure it will. Now I'm tightening it and see if she'll slide on. Almost, and loosening it again. In she goes, tighten it. I'll see if I can get some bolts in there. There we go. Now I'm going to move over to the power steering portion. I'm not used to this, so this will be interesting. This is a new power steering pump. So I also got crush washers, O-ring, and that's all I need. I've got 2 crush washers and 1 O-ring. 1 crush washer goes on this, right by the head. Then I put my piece in, which is this. Slide him on, just like so. And then the other crush washer goes on the other side. This is important to replace these because it will leak if you reuse them. You don't want to do this again, especially power steering fluid's gross. So, and then it just goes into the hole down there. I just dropped the crush washer. Damn. I don't know if the other tube is supposed to go on first because there's an in and an out. This is the pressure line I'm putting on. I don't know if one goes first or whatever. I'm just kind of figuring it out as I go. And I've got it. You can't see anything, but she's there. I'll zoom in for you. Look at that. She's on with new stuff. Just got to tighten it. It's a 17. Power steering's all done. I know it's hard to see. It is very tight in this engine bay. The engine and transmission are very big for this car. It's like a half an inch on each side when you're going in. So it's tight, that's for sure. I'm so excited to have power steering. I'm gonna be able to shred this thing when drifting, and I'm gonna be able to drive it straight when I want to drag race. Because like, honestly, I'd be death gripping the wheel with two hands, and I'd be so scared to shift to take one hand off. Terrifying. So hopefully the power steering is going to help. I'm gonna have to see later. All right, so now I'm just gonna do everything, put wiring on, get the fuel system good, intake on, turbo lines all made sure they're all good, and I'm gonna try and start this engine today. Big thanks to Exile AutoWorks with an X. They made me custom intake gaskets. They made it out of this crazy material that can be reused no matter how many times you want to reuse them. It's great for me. I've got my intakes off regularly to check things out, make sure things are running up to par. So huge thanks to Exile for sure. Here I'm just getting all my wiring figured out. I plugged a few holes before I threw the engine in, so I had to relocate some vacuum lines and some wiring for my starter, for the button on my dash. So there was a few things that I needed to reconfigure, but it wasn't a big deal. I just had to basically tape everything together that I wanted to come through the new hole, and then I pulled it through, and now I'm putting power steering and oil and all that good stuff. Okay, so I've got everything hooked up other than my distributor. I don't have the cap on, I don't have the wires on, none of that stuff. Reason being is because before I start a new engine that I've never ran before, I take out all the plugs, crank the engine over for about 20-30 seconds, let the oil get up into the top of the engine, into the bearings before there's any load on it. Because if you have the plugs in, it will compress, and if you haven't had your engine had an engine cycle at all in years, all those bearings are going to be dry and they're just going to be rubbing on each other, which isn't a good thing. So you want to have the least amount of friction on them possible. So I take out the plugs, crank it over. So I don't even have my distributor hooked up yet because I don't want it to fire. I've got the oil filter on, I've got oil in it, I've got power steering fluid in it. I'm going to crank it over to check for leaks and all that stuff after I take out the spark plugs. Okay, all the plugs are out, so now I'm gonna crank it over, get some oil to the top of the engine. All right, this is inside of my car right now. This panel right here is for the front engine, this is for the rear. That will turn on all my switches, so now they will be active. This is my ignition, this is my fan, this is my computer, blah, 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 blah. So I don't need any of that, all I need to do is crank it. Oh man, I love this car. It's been a while since I've actually had power to it, and on my dash, I've always got that high beam light on. I don't know what I did when I wired it, but that high beam light has been on for a while, since I did the twin engine swap. Don't know how, don't know why, but everything works except the high beams, but who cares, right? So now I'm gonna crank it over. Just like so. Uh-oh. Oops, I had it ground a little bit loose. Let's try that again. One, two, three. So that was about 5 seconds cranking. I'm gonna see if any oil's leaking from anywhere. Looks good to me. I'll take another look. Back for some more. I'm gonna get as much time cranking this baby over as I can, It hasn't been started for years, so I want to make sure she is all lubed up inside. Got a leak. I didn't tighten up my freaking oil feed for my turbo. Oops. I took a peek in my fuel tank and the fuel does not look healthy. This is normal pump fuel, so I'm gonna drain it all out, put some fresh fuel in, get the injectors all hooked up, get the spark plugs all in, get the distributor cap on, and then I'll try and fire it. I apologize, I didn't tell you before that you have to make sure that your fuel pump is not getting power while you're cranking it over with the plugs out, because you don't want fuel going everywhere and all that. So I'm completely putting new fuel in, cleaned out my entire fuel system, got a nice fresh start. So now, before I'm even putting my distributor together, I'm gonna make sure I've sparked. So I have my coil here, and I've got it routed to a spark plug on my throttle body. So I've got a stick here. I'm gonna push the start button and then take a look and see if I've got spark. Yep. Before that fell, I did see spark, so that's a good sign. As soon as I get fuel to it, she's gonna go. And as you can hear, it did have compression and it sounded great. Now all I gotta do is put the cap and rotor on with the plug wires, and I'm gonna try it with some new fuel, obviously. I kid you not, people do not even realize how nuts this car is. Like, I'm not pushing on people to realize it's nuts at all. Like, I built it for me, 100%. Honestly, the thing is scary. It terrifies me every time I sit in it. I have to talk myself into getting into it because it's such an adrenaline rush. All right, I've got two things to do before I start it. These are the last two things. I need to put my fuel pump back on. I need to get that working, get power to it, easy peasy, just plug it in. Second, I've always had E85 in this car. I put 87 in, and E85, it requires more fuel compared to 87. So if I started it up, it'll smoke really bad because it's gonna be getting way too much fuel. So I've got my laptop out. All right, I'm gonna start this in a couple minutes, but I need to take some fuel out of my original fuel map because I usually run E85. Got my program here. I'm basically gonna highlight this whole thing, take out 30%. If it runs rich, it runs rich. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm just gonna multiply it by 30% or 0.7, which would multiply it down 30% because I'm multiplying by 0.7. Enter, burn. Okay, I just made a quick map down here to run on the pump fuel because it's not gonna be ran on pump fuel other than like first startups and stuff like that. I usually let the car sit over winter with pump fuel in it because when you leave E85 in your fuel tank, it will literally dry up every seal you have, including the seals on your injectors, and your injectors will be very full of gunk and all that not good stuff. So regardless, after I get this engine running and the back one running, making sure the engines are healthy, I'm gonna take the injectors out of all of them, all 12, and then get them clean and get them flow tested. Thankfully, I have a sponsor for that, and that will help out huge because that's a very expensive job to get done. So here we go. I'm gonna get her started. All I gotta do is hit go. I'm just gonna do this live. I'm not gonna stop the camera or anything. All right, I'm gonna prime the fuel pump. There, she's priming. And then I'm just gonna hit the old start button. Oh yeah! Very I'm just gonna multiply the entire map by 0.8. So that is going to take me down by 20% in fuel.
Smoking anymore, it's running good. Feels looking good. I'm gonna shut it off. Oh yes. Woo! That's what I'm talking about. This is a healthy running engine. I know it. It sounded amazing. Took 2 seconds to get the smoke away. If you do remember, I did put oil in all the cylinders, so it did have to burn off some oil, but she's running sick. Alright guys, some cool content's gonna be coming up soon. Very shortly, the car is gonna be done. Within 1 month, the car is gonna be completely done, and I'm gonna be able to drive it in my lot, in your lot, in your driveway, doing burnouts, wherever. As long as she runs, I'm gonna send it. Alright guys, we'll see you in the next one. Like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you later. This is usually fairly frightening.